Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call tonight's meeting, February 4th, 2016, 6 o'clock p.m., special meeting, City Council, and to order. And I know it's not on the agenda, but I'd like to stand for a moment of silence and our flag salute. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Jones, roll call, please.
Mr. Jerome?
Here.
Mr. Witt?
Here.
Mr. Rolfson?
Here.
Mr. Fritz?
Here.
Mr. Slavy?
Here.
Mr. Crown?
Here.
Mr. Millette?
Here. Okay. Let's start off. 2 weeks ago, after Mr. Pastu told me of his desire to leave, I spoke with Cliff Shepard, who suggested to be prepared. I should contact the ICMA, the International City Managers Association, as it is the premier association to assist Mount Dora in locating an interim city manager. The ICMA referred me to the FCCMA, which is the Florida City of County Manager Association. The FCCMA provided a link to their website with a list of the current managers in transit, all with extensive Florida City Manager experience. Last week I spoke with Bob Slavin, who handled our city manager recruitment last spring for Mount Dora. First, Mr. Slavin said he absolutely would honor his contract and locate another city manager without any additional recruitment fees. So Mr. Pastu, if he left the city, for any reason within the 2 years of his employment, that was our contract with Slavin, and he would honor that contract. Secondly, Mr. Slavin reviewed the list from the FCCMA. He spoke very highly of 3 of the 8 candidates listed, and suggested I call those 3 immediately. They were Russ Blackburn, Stephen Cottrell, and Mark Cutney. Yesterday I contacted the Florida League of Cities for a list of senior advisors, formerly known as the Range Riders Program. They are semi-retired city managers who are available for short-term assignments. In speaking with the senior advisors, Program Coordinator Kurt Bresner, a retired IACMA city manager himself, he also mentioned Mr. Blackburn, Mr. Cottrell, and Mr. Cutney. Mr. Bresner sent emails to some of his potential candidates. Those who responded, I had their information printed for review. All 3 of the sources I contacted recommended the same 3 candidates. Russ Blackburn called yesterday to say he was currently being considered for 2 positions and was not currently available while those were in process. You have, I think you have everybody's information. You have Stephen Cottrell's, Mark Cutney's resumes in the agenda packet, along with others that were sent from some other people that we did not call at that point. They just called me. I think one came from Mr. Bresner's contact, another one just sent me something, which I've provided. All those resumes have been provided for the public and for the council tonight. Mr. Cutney was one of the 8 semi-finalists in Mount Dora last spring, missing to cut the finalists by 1/10 of a point. Mr. Slavin spoke very highly of him and had our city council open the finalist list to a 3rd candidate. After 2 of the 4 candidates withdrew, Mr. Cutney would have been interviewed probably at that point. Both Mr. Cutney and Mr. Cottrell and the other candidates, Ernie Hope and Mr. Barnett, sent me their resumes also, again, which are included. Both Mr. Cutney, Mr. Cottrell, and I got a list of their times, but everybody basically is available next week for personal interviews in Mount Dora, if that is how our council chooses to proceed. And right now I'd like to open up the floor then to the council for discussion.
I would like to speak, please. Mayor?
Go ahead.
Okay, so we're going for interim city manager, but don't we already have one? as far as I know, Mr. Regentine acts as an interim city manager. He has been for a while. So I don't understand why we're doing this. Can you please, I'm a little confused.
Mr. Regentine in the past has served as the acting city manager and and currently as a deputy city manager. He is not an interim city manager.
Is there a difference? I'm not.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Sure.
And here's another confusion. I just kind of want to. There's a email from a public record, Jay Surratt, dated Wednesday, February 3rd, 2016, at 4 o'clock, and it says S. Cottrell resume. How did this person know about Mr. Cottrell? I'm just confused.
When I was doing my searches and everything, I had Mr. Surratt be with me at the time to just help me out with different things that he needed help me out with.
I thought, isn't that what council's supposed to do?
Why I did this? This is part of my job that I was doing based on what Mr. Shepherd asked me to do to be prepared for this evening.
Okay.
I have a full schedule myself, and I cannot do everything myself.
Well, that's why we have
And I can't,
administration
since I
with the
can't talk
human
to,
resources
since I
to
cannot
do
talk
this.
to you.
I think it is I think it's disrespect to this council that you're doing the job and not us.
Okay, I am still empowered to do certain things, and I'm going on the advice of
Well-
our city attorney to do things, so I'm
I'm not
going to
really
discuss
happy
that.
with it because I feel like I haven't been in the process. I think we're supposed to work together, not just as one. Am I missing something here?
We are working together tonight, and I
No,
brought
no,
things
no,
to this.
we're not working when you do it yourself.
I'm sorry you feel that way.
I'm not the only one who feels that way, Mayor. You want to bring people together, but you're just taking the lead yourself. And this, from Jay Surratt, this has me concerned. S. Cottrell resume. And then, come on, doesn't anyone else agree with me here? Am I just the only one this is coming to? We have a fine, qualified, and Mr. Reddington, everyone praises wonderful ways. Why can't we just save the taxpayers' money instead of hiring someone when we have Mr. Reddington on staff already doing it? Why?
We are here for
Why are we
discussion.
even here? I want an answer.
Mr. Olson.
Maybe I can ask a straightforward question. Is Mr. Regentine a contender? Can he be a contender for the interim manager? And the reason I say that is he is currently our deputy. He's been here for 20 years, acting as a manager in the absence of the managers. He knows the city no better than anybody else, period. And I suspect our directors, staff directors, would rather work on an interim basis with somebody they know and trust and have worked with for years. And as Ms. Rich mentioned, we'll be paying an interim city manager, if it isn't somebody already here, out of taxpayer dollars, when it's just an interim position to manage while we're working for a new manager. And I see no reason why Mr. Regentine, who is already in the budget, every dime is in the budget, why we have to waste taxpayer dollars. These folks sitting here, by searching for an interim city manager, I'd love to discuss it. I'm happy that this is part of the discussion. And he's here, he's funded, not a dime, costs us not a dime more, but we'd have to pay thousands of dollars over a period of time for an interim manager that isn't here. And I'm wondering what the sense is in that, considering his background. There's nothing that disqualifies him, zero. There's nothing legally that disqualifies him from being an interim or an acting or whatever, which he's done for 20 years while he's here when the main manager is gone. So he's got the experience, he's been there and done that, and I'm wondering, is he a contender for the interim manager position? Yes or no? That's my question to the whole council, not just you.
We're discussing this whole thing, and I realize that, but I'm gonna tell you right now, and my feelings on that, and again, Mark is our deputy city manager right now, okay? Until He's there, he's our deputy city manager, no question about that. I just don't feel right now that, my own personal, that it's not fair to put Mark in this kind of, or Mr. Reagan, I'm sorry, Mr. Reagan in this kind of position right now, that's going to put him in a thing of being subjected to, I think, unfair criticism from any side of whatever you want to talk about here. And I think if we do this with an independent person, we can come here and be the interim manager at this point, and then we can move on from there.
Excuse me,
I just feel.
I have someone
Just a minute.
Hold on, no, Mr. Olson.
Can I continue?
And let other people talk too.
Let me continue. I understand that. I understand the philosophy of having, to use your famous words, fresh eyes.
I never use the words fresh eyes.
I was being,
I get full credit.
you didn't see the tongue in my cheek.
Well, it's still not my words.
No. But to have somebody come in that costs us money, when Mark can do the same thing, assuming Mr. Regenstein wants to do that. If he doesn't want to do it, I'm backing off. But if he actually would accept the job, he's a big boy. He can handle these things. He's been handling the trauma in the last year or two very, very well, admirably. So it seems to me that it would be a perfect choice, ideal, take the pressure off that we're all feeling, and he could carry on. He's just going to do the city council's bidding.
Okay, Mr. Olson, I think you've been making that point over and over again. I expressed mine. I'd like to have somebody else maybe
Sure.
express an opinion also if they'd like to.
Thank you. So I think we'll be talking about a couple of details. The first one, and maybe this is too nuanced for my own understanding, but for me, the question shouldn't be asked of Mark. And the reason is, to ask the question is to imply that we're putting pressure on him to either take the job or not take the job, or to apply or not to apply. So my position is that I don't even want to ask him. If he wants to, he can. But to ask him is to put pressure on him, and I don't believe, from a charter perspective, that we should be putting pressure as a council on employees of the city. And so I think what I understand so far is that if he wants to apply for interim city manager, that he's fine to do so. And then we would proceed from there. But to somewhat force him or cajole him, I think is inappropriate.
I couldn't agree more.
So I think that's it.
I wouldn't force him to do anything.
Yeah. And I don't in any way think that you are.
Mr. Roulette?
Mr. Regenstein is a department head with a full plate. They threw the word out tsunami. Okay, so now you want to take him away from his day-to-day duties to give him additional duties. I think Mr. Regenstein would be best served to the city if he maintained his position as department head of planning and zoning. I think it would be good to get an interim, and if Mr. Regenstein wants to apply for the active city manager job in the future, he may do so.
May I speak?
I'd like to hear from Mrs.
Wait a minute, I was after Mr. Ralston, you skipped me.
I'd like that, you spoke, all right. I want to try to spread around, we'll get some discussion going, and then.
I will yield to
hang
Ms.
on.
Rich if she
Okay,
wants to
that's fine.
continue her conversation.
The way you treat me. The objectives of a deputy city manager is under broad direction of the city manager, assists in the management of city government and performs related work as required, provides general management direction as second in charge of an organization with 200 plus employees and a 45 million plus operating budget, shall be responsible for management and direction of the Department of Planning and Development, included with the deputy city manager. And he's been doing a fine job. Even when his plate is full, he manages to be very organized. And he, in the past with city manager Michael Quinn, when Michael Quinn was on vacation or leave of absence, Mark stepped in, and he continues to step in. And I do not want to have the taxpayers have to do this burden of a political agenda.
My question personal feeling is that, I think that if Mr. Regentine wants to apply, along with everyone else, for the position of interim, I don't have an issue with that. However, I personally believe that I think we need a level of, what's the right word, maybe, objectivity that I believe can only come from an outside source at this point. I think that serves the city and the government the best at this point in time. So, those are my views.
Go ahead.
I tend to agree with what Mr. Rowlett said. It is concerning with the level of work that Mr. Regentine has in a full-time plus position already to assume big added responsibilities. And in this instance, we're probably not looking at covering during a week or two vacation time or a sick leave or something like that. This is liable to be a number of months, and I have concerns about that. I would agree with Mrs. Tillett that certainly welcome applications, but I do have similar concerns to what Mr. Rowlett voiced.
Okay, I know we discussed a few things here. I don't know how far, because this is all new to me also, and I'd like to get some, I know we have two council people who went through a similar process, but for a full search, not an interim search. So I guess probably from the interim search, I guess we're all rookies at that one, that part of it. So, yeah.
Can I just point something out to you? Unfortunately, it's without interpretation other than what the charter says, but I think in the discussion of this should be in light of the charter. And of course, it talks about the ability of the city manager to appoint an acting by a letter of record which is filed with the city of council. The city manager is designated, subject to approval of city council, a qualified city administrative officer, department head, and it's for not less than 3, no more than 21 days in duration. However, it also says, if you go down further, the city council shall appoint, and these are the key words I want you to focus on, a qualified city administrative officer or department head to exercise the powers and perform the duties of city manager during any temporary absence or disability of the city manager for more than 21 days. So depending on how you define temporary absence, for example, is it a temporary absence if Mr. Pastou's notice period ends and we're in the process of bringing in a new city manager? So is that a temporary absence or not? I don't know. There's not a case that's going to tell me the answer to that question. But if that is how it would be interpreted, your choices would not include any of the people because they are neither a city administrative officer nor a department head. So just FYI, I don't know what the outcome would be, but you should
So
know.
wait, back up.
Yeah.
So you're basically saying we can't appoint an interim city manager?
No, I'm saying that your choices, if, depending on how you interpret this provision, it says, shall appoint, so that's definite, a qualified city administrative officer. If you interpret that as I do, meaning somebody from within the city, that would be option 1, or a department head, that would be option 2. Now, as you probably already know, because I think you asked this question, or wait a minute, no, it was Mr. Pastou who asked the question. There are people that might come to mind that couldn't because it would be dual office holding. For example, the police chief can't, the fire chief can't, because they are also state constitutional officers. It'd have to be from a department that's not a state constitutional officer. But again, I can only read the words here and tell you what I think, but there's not a case law that I can say, see, here's how it's been interpreted. That's not the situation. This is under section 24.
Mr. Shepherd, could I ask you to read that section?
Here's what it says, and this is for longer than 21 days.
Yep.
It says, the city council shall, so that's a definite, we understand that word, appoint a qualified city administrative officer, okay, or a department head to exercise the powers and perform the duties of city manager during any temporary absence or disability of the city manager for more than 21 days in duration. So the two things that are unknown in this sentence to me are, does temporary absence of the city manager include the situation we will be facing in 4 weeks? Or not, I don't know. There's not a case I can point to that interprets it. But what I am confident in, even though I don't have a case, is if this does apply, if this section applies, it's gotta be somebody within what we've got.
Well, I guess, I understand what a department head is,
Yes.
fire chief, police chief, Mr. Eggington, et cetera. But the first part, a
City administrative
qualified
officer.
city administrative officer, does that limit us to this city, or is it a credential, somebody who, has the education, training, and experience to be?
I wish I could answer that definitively. I cannot, but I can tell you that you would certainly weigh in favor of that, since that same language is used when they talk about acting city manager for the less than 28-day period. So if you put those things together, it says qualified city administrative officer or department head. You wouldn't have had, for example, Mr. Quinn going out and saying, hey, I'm going to get the guy from Eustis. That wouldn't have happened. So if you look at how those things have been interpreted by this city in the past, you would conclude someone within the city. Because it's the same language whether you're more than 21 days or less than 21 days.
Thanks.
Not less than 3, no more than 21 days.
Right, but it's the same language in terms of department head or qualified administrative officer.
Well, it says qualified city read the whole thing. By letter of record filed with the city council, the city manager, that's Mr. Pestu is still
Right.
the city manager, shall designate, subject to approval of the city council, a qualified city administrative officer or department head to exercise the powers and perform the duties of city manager during any temporary absence or disability of the city manager, not less than 3 nor more than 21 days duration.
Correct.
Then it says, during such absence, the council may, by majority vote of the full city council, revoke any such designation at any time and appoint another administrative officer or department head to serve until cessation of the city manager's absence or disability.
Yes.
And then the sentence that the city council shall appoint a qualified city administrative officer or department head to exercise the powers and perform the duties of city manager during any temporary absence or disability of the city manager of more than 21 days duration. However, when does our 21 days start clicking? Is that at the end of whenever Mr. Pastu, I believe that,
Well,
that his
we're not
agreement
talking-
was
at that point,
until
we're
the
not
4th
talking
of March.
Yeah, well, at the end of 4
We're not
weeks,
talking temporary.
he's gone. So for right now, if you read this, it's city manager's responsibility. At the end of the 4 weeks, that would shift to you guys, because that would go over at the end of 21 days, because I guess his notice is longer than 21 days. So for the next couple of weeks, it's in Mr. Pastu's court, but soon enough, it will be in your court. The only thing I'm focusing on or trying to get you to understand is that it uses the same term, qualified city administrative officer, whether that's Vince or whoever the city manager is, or whether it's you all. And so when you read those two things together, that tries to give you context. So that question was asked by Mr. Creel, does that mean it has to be within the city? I can't tell you by cases one way or the other, but I can tell you, obviously, if Vince weren't leaving, if he were just going on vacation, he wouldn't be calling Eustis for a city, what do they say, a qualified city administrative officer.
He's going to appoint an acting, whether it be.
And it would be
And
somebody
right now,
within the
since we
city. have
have a deputy, we know who that person is.
It'd be somebody within the
But,
city.
bottom line, I can think what you're saying, we can still search for an interim to start at a date. It still does not
That's how I
does not preclude us from searching to go out for an interim city manager. Does not. I am not interpreting what you're saying in any way, saying that we cannot still do what we have to do as this council, be prepared when that 21 days is up. To have a permanent interim city manager on staff, ready to go.
At the end of the day, I just give the information.
I know you are, and I appreciate that, but you're not saying that we can't do that.
What, Mr. Mayor, what I hear him saying is,
Please, hold on.
I was being asked if past president bears
You
on
may
that.
make the comment out loud then, please.
Okay, I'd be happy to. My question to Cliff was on past precedent, because I was just gonna bring up the fact that after the termination of Bernice Brinson, what the city council did was similar to the process you're discussing tonight. Solicited for an interim city manager, collected resumes, interviewed, and then selected Tony Shoemaker at the time, who was a former city manager of Clearwater, I believe, to serve in that interim period before selecting a permanent city manager. So if past precedent has anything to do with it, that's the process we went through previously, whether that 10 or 11 years ago.
That's good information. That predates me, and it shows how important institutional knowledge can be.
Okay, does anybody, we can get all that. If everybody wants to do any digs right now, do them now, and we'll get them all out in one.
I just have one clarification, mostly, I don't know how many people here have brought their charter done.
Give us the section.
Section 24 still. I just wanted to clarify that it says the city manager shall designate, and then it says subject to approval of the city council. So I just wanted to clarify that with Ms. Deborah.
For the 21 days.
Mr. Shepherd, one more question. Sorry, not a very quick study here. Qualified city administrator or
Department head.
If we were, if the interpretation were that these were inside only, inside the organization only, would there be, isn't it redundant, a qualified city administrator or department head? Wouldn't a department head be a qualified city administrator?
Not necessarily, and I'll give you an example. I don't believe, although I may be corrected here, that Ms. Keogh Johns is a department head, but she is a city clerk, so she's an administrative officer. I think that's accurate.
I'm assuming that those language was intended to be broad enough, but specific enough. And so that was maybe a good example to use our clerk as an example.
I don't know, maybe she feels she used to.
So I'm trying to,
Maybe take a lot of
maybe
certification courses.
if I could try to understand or summarize it, maybe as to say that whatever that says or doesn't say, it's applicable only during the time that Mr. Pastu is still the city manager? Or are you suggesting that the term absence somehow gives a perpetuity to it, like a presidential Supreme Court, you know?
I'm not suggesting it. What I'm suggesting is a couple things. It's simple enough to understand the first 21 days. That's relatively simple, with the exception of what is meant by qualified city administrative officer or department head. We know department head, the other one, and with the additional information about Ms. Brinson, which was way before my time, may put some historical perspective on it. With regard to after, it depends on that interpretation of what does temporary absence mean. Because if you have no city manager, except whoever's acting deputy, whatever term you throw out there, is that a temporary absence because you're intending to fill the position, or not? I don't know, because there's nothing I can point to. Here's a case that's interpreted.
Okay, well, I think for me, temporary absence is when the city manager is absent for a period of time before coming back. I mean, if it's someone that was terminated, which is not the case, I would never think of them as calling it an absence of infinity. Or if someone left a job, I wouldn't call it, someone leaving for infinity. I mean, they quit. Absence means coming back to me, that it's an interim time frame. Whether it's 2 days, 21 days, so I think that clause doesn't have any merit after that time frame. But be that as it may, I don't know that moves us off of the kind of circle where we're going nowhere.
Let me just, I want to go back a little bit here too from the standpoint that, unless there's something that this council doesn't know at this point, is Mr. Pastu planning on taking a disability?
I only know about 4 weeks notice. That's all I know about.
Okay, we have a 4 weeks notice. We have something that's going to be until I think it's March 4th. takes effect? Okay, so the purpose, I think, of my initial phone call to you a while back was to prepare for whatever we have to prepare for. You know, being in a position of preparedness instead of starting from scratch now, which delays things. If we do things that need to be done now, could have somebody to come in front of this council and vote on as an interim city manager before Mr. Pastu's contract runs out. Okay, so I don't see, unless he's planning to do something that I don't know about, the temporary, what do you call it, the act, wrong word, what was that word again?
Hang on, I think it's temporary absence.
Temporary, yeah, and,
Temporary absence for disability, yeah.
unless he's planning a temporary, disability, temporary something like that, that we don't know about, then I think we should proceed and look and do what I think we're here tonight, to do something, if we can get together, and again, you know, and I do try to take my job seriously as much as I can and do what I have to do. And if you want to criticize me for it, go right ahead. But until, you know, I just will have to do what I need to do to help and do what I have to, and get things moving. Yes, we do have people, and I've asked Mr. Bloom to be here tonight because I knew, just to be in case we have some things that we need to discuss with him tonight also, and to be here as a resource for us. And usually a lot of times doesn't come, but I made a request today to Mr. Pastu that he contact Mr. Bloom and ask him if he could be here tonight as a resource if we need him tonight. But like I mentioned before, we do have people. We have resumes. Now, I'm not asking people to read resumes tonight. Go through them. They are being provided. They have been provided to the public. I had a little miscommunication with Misty today. Asked her to provide these things to the public, and I didn't arrange to print a whole bunch of things tonight, and that they would be available on the website for everybody. But thank you, Misty, for going through that. And so avail yourself of her time and the trouble of printing those things out tonight. So they are available for there, so you don't have to go download them and print them out yourself. So what we had so far that I know of, and we've had 4 people who showed an interest, and one of them we maybe have to discuss a little more, but I think it still behooves us to look at some of the things. But everybody, I called them all who did submit something to me. I called them all. Yes, I could have Mr. Blum call do it for me, but I had the information. I gave them a call, asked them when they are available, if they're going to be available next week. 2 of them are available 4 days next week. 2 are available 2 days out of the 2. So we have 4 people available for interviews, either private interviews with the city council. They'll be available. They can be available on Monday and Tuesday, you know, for interviews, and that can be arranged through Mr. Blum's office with city clerk, Misty, whatever. Excuse me, Miss Eldrin. And we can arrange those things, and those who can't make be there personally, Mr. Shepherd, I believe that the phone calls are allowed to be had. They can do a phone interview with them, and let's say designated time frame while the people here during that day. And I think we can move this thing forward quickly, do what we have to do, try to keep a semblance of order in the city, and keep it going. And I appreciate your remarks, Miss Rich, about the cost and stuff. But again, this council was thrown into a predicament, and we're going to try to get out of this thing and move as quickly as possible. And again, I just want to express a
Thank you. I want to make it clear that I've heard a little mixture, but my understanding of what I've heard, Mr. Slavey and others, that Mr. Regentine is not disqualified for being an interim city manager, and he may apply for that position. Is that correct?
Anybody qualified would be allowed to apply for it.
But would you wouldn't dispute Mr. Regantine's qualifications, I hope, to be an interim city manager? I mean,
Would it do me any good? No.
No, I would not.
I
Mr.
appreciate
Regentine
your
knows
smile,
that.
I do. So maybe that was a set-up question, and I apologize for that. But because virtually every member of this council in the past, or at least at the one of the council meetings where, even the one where you read your opening statement, the 19th, we talked about, that Mr. Regentine has never been a part of this mix. It shows support for him that way. Nobody is talking about abolishing Mr. Regantine's job. Some of them have said he's a fine manager, other than me, fine person, fine qualified official for our city. So I'm hearing from everybody in this council that he is more than qualified to be the interim manager. If that's the case, he's also free. I want us to think about that, rather than not having any excuses or guises that we need, well, something new, or that's putting him in a position. If he doesn't want the position, I'm not gonna want him in there. But if he would like to serve with his qualifications and says he can do the job, why don't we give him that chance, when we do vote on that, to do the job? Because he believes he can do it. And if he can't do the job, the next council meeting can fire him. So we have control over that if he's not doing his job. He's got 3 additional other staff people to help him in planning and zoning. And he was acting city administrator before Mr. Pasteur came on for I'm not.
Okay, yeah, I realize, but you know, do we need to go through a resume right now at this point where
I don't know.
I know, and unless I don't plan on reading all the resumes tonight.
Okay.
So you know,
Okay, very good.
And I realize the lobbying effort, and I appreciate that.
And the cost.
But no, okay, let's go back with the cost factor here. And correct me if I'm wrong. We have Mr. Pasteur's agreement ending on March the 4th. In previous times when Mr. Regentine has been appointed as an acting city manager, he has a set salary, which I'm going to assume is lower than Mr. Pasteur's. When he handles Mr. Pasteur's job, for whatever period of time it is, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, because I thought that you never were given a stipend, he gets you get a stipend for that, for the difference between the 2 salaries. Okay, for the time that you work in that position. Okay, so if I'm wrong, Mr. Baum, anybody correct me on that, but I feel that's there. So if an interim comes in to replace Mr. Pasteur, he would be getting, the interim would still be getting the salary that Mr. Pasteur, at the most, probably less, at the most that Mr. Pasteur made, okay, as an interim. And Mr. Regentine still has his position as the deputy city manager, which is still the same salary. So I don't see a major cost factor in this thing.
You mean in addition to the
In addition, right.
50,000 that we paid for his severance?
No, that is a total different thing. That's not a salary. We're talking salaries here. Okay, that's a whole separate agreement. Okay, got nothing to do with the salary issue that you raised.
So, I gotta tell you that I would have an argument with myself, and one of us would lose, in that, I just don't feel it's appropriate to take one person and put that person in as interim city manager without a process. Last time the city went through a process and did it, I got up as a citizen and chewed out the city council for filling the deputy city manager position without posting it. And to not have this, interim city manager position posted, the assumption is that, by some, that Mr. Regentine is the only person on staff who would want the position or who is qualified. And while that may be absolutely true, might be, to not have it open for other employees if they wanted to seems not the appropriate way to do it. If I had my business and I had an opening of importance, I wouldn't say, I'm taking Bob here and I'm moving him up. I'd say, who's ever interested, come on up and put your name in the hat. Now, most of us at the coffee bar or at the water cooler would figure that Bob's gonna be the guy maybe, or whatever it is, but I think people have to step up and say, I want the job, before we hand people jobs. It just seems like the way to do it, in my view.
That was very well said. I happen to agree with you.
No, and just to make it clear, in my opening statements, I mentioned the fact that when cities in this state go out for an interim search, they rely on the Florida League of Cities, which is the first place of contact. They referred me to somebody else. It all goes back to this ICMA, all goes back in through the Florida League of Cities. They have an MIT list. when I talked with Mr. Slavin to ask him what we, you know, our procedures and things like that, to ask him if he was going to be honoring his contract, he said yes, and he says, well, you can get an interim through the MIT list at the Florida League of Cities. I says, you have that list? He says, no, you get it right there online, which is where I got mine. So it's the same list, same people. So I had him on the phone, took the opportunity to ask him, can you comment on any of the people? And he did, and that's where he came up with some of the names, and says this is you know, good names, things like that, and you're good to go with these kind of people. So that's where the things that I did, you know, so we can move this thing forward. And
What are the
then
names that the ICME recommended? Which ones? Can you refresh my memory on that?
Mr. Blackburn, Mr. Cottrell, and Mr. Cutney. And then I got two others. I got two others that were, one was unsolicited and one came from the, I think, Mr. Shepherd gave me a name that way, so called them Range Riders. I never heard of that thing before. And, but they changed their name. They're called Senior Advisors now. I guess Range Riders didn't hit it too well. They're called Senior Advisors, who mainly just got stuff. They recommended one person, they sent out an email. The guy said he was gonna do an email blast to their whole man. I said, no. You know, not the whole list. I says, give it to your what you feel your good people that would do it. He sent out an email to 12 people, got one response back on it. And,
To follow up my
then
question, Mr. Cutney in his cover letter says, and I quote, "My interest would be as a permanent full-time manager, not as an interim."
I realize that. He sent that cover letter in, and that was not his initial thing, but his cover letter said he's interested in that, which does create a dilemma. And I think from the standpoint that we can either, you know, either eliminate him with that cover letter or still interview and just relay the intention of this city, you know, the city council that we're looking for an interim, and see if he is at the time of interview that he would want to change his mind. But if he sticks to his cover letter, basically, I feel he's taken out of the mix at this point, because he would have to apply at another time down the road.
So,
Yeah, apply for a
he's
permanent.
applying now, he's got 2 jobs in the mix right now.
He's got 2 jobs in the mix, but he says he would like to interview with the intent, and I guess this, when we talk about, and the lawyer talk, you know, how you interpret things, you can interpret that one of 2 ways, that he would be willing to interview, but he's doing it with the intent that he's looking at a permanent position down the road also. And, so it makes that dilemma with me on how we interpret. I didn't want to go back and call him and try to get any other, I just felt inappropriate to try to get in a conversation with him on anything at that point.
So how do we, is there a way in which the rest of us, 6, can know who 12 more are that you've now rejected?
No, I didn't reject anybody.
Oh.
I didn't reject anybody. I did not get responses from them. I didn't call, these lists were here, okay? These were the top 3 that Mr. Slavin said to go after, which I did.
So how many Range Rovers or whatever that is?
There's a mess of
I
them.
like Range Rover better.
No, Range Rider. Range Rider.
And maybe the roll too. Who are the, how many are there out
Do you remember who the Range Rider was, by chance? And what horse he rode?
there? How many are there? Do you know?
Oh, I don't know.
Is it 100 or-
They're people that, from what I understand, they're retired
I
people
got
who
that.
can basically babysit your school, your city council, your city hall, and make sure everything works. They have certifications and things like that. There's
I understand.
some of them are all over the place.
So your suggestion is that we take the 4 or the 3 that you have screened, and that those are the ones we should read and have another meeting to interview them? Is that what you're suggesting?
These 4 right now that we can start with, and then we can start doing something with and see what we think. And if it doesn't come out to anybody at that point, then we get some more names off Mr. Slavin or something, and we'll
Sure,
discuss some more.
because we've got our manager still here for a month.
We got him for here, and we have a deputy here, and if we have to start going into a temporary thing, and but we'll see what happens. And but if we don't do anything, we're gonna have it down another week, another or 2 weeks, and the can just keeps getting kicked further and further down the road, and we need to do something and to stabilize our situation.
Did any of these interim city managers, the 4, tell you what their fees would be? What do you
No,
expect?
what they asked me, and I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't know what, I don't even look at our, right now, if somebody asked me what, Mr. Pastu made, I don't know what he makes, I really don't. And I should be, I'm ashamed of myself for not knowing that, but, being the mayor, but I don't know his exact salary, but I basically said, it's gonna be somewhere within the range, I'm sure it is, I don't know how we pay people on that, but, that's again a negotiable point that we go with.
So, I'm still a little confused. Where do we go from here? Are we, well, we don't know.
Okay,
We're discussing where we're going.
Okay, we're discussing where we're going with this, but, my recommendation, if I can say what I mentioned before, 2 dates, talking with the four people, that there's, 2 dates that all 4 of them are available, okay? And I figure if we can do either phone interviews or, set up times they're gonna be available in an all day, Monday and Tuesday, all 4 of these people are available Monday and Tuesday. To come here, and we can, again, we'll do some coordinating with staff as to where we can, set them up, how we can coordinate, appointments with, city council people to come in, do interviews, and, do what we have to do, and see what we come up with when it's all concluded at that point.
And the first day, the interim manager that we might select, the first day he will serve is March 5th. Is that
Well,
correct?
we're hoping that that's there. Everybody says they're available, and that was one of the things I asked, your availability, and so far, these 4 have expressed availability. That's why Mr. Blackburn was not included in the mix. Again, highly recommended, but not included because he says he is months and months down the road.
But I just was wondering, the date to start, regardless of the availability, the date for our interim manager is going to start in, it's a consensus.
I would have to, March 5th. I
Okay.
would have to think that would be the day we're looking to start, yes.
Okay.
And this is where I this is why I would ask Mr. Bloom, and possibility when we get into, I know, I don't know if we should be all working as a council, working off of a set script for questions, anything like that, or just do a free-for-all type thing. I don't know if that's appropriate, but it's not appropriate at that point.
Mayor, Ken Bloom, B-L-O-O-M. It's not Blum.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Thank you.
Past precedent tells me that over a 2-day period, we arranged for each council member to interview each of the candidates individually over the course of 2 days. They had a script, set questions that was developed by council, and everyone asked the same questions, and then at some point they convened as a council and discussed the candidates after the interviews. The interviews typically took 45 minutes to an hour. It was all done here at City Hall, the room across the hall from here, and really was just finished in 2 days. So it's not a complicated process. The pay that was determined was based on the current pay that the city manager was making at that time. Back in those days, the city manager earned $95,000 a year. It was paid bi-weekly through normal payroll processing. The city covered the costs, living expenses for the city manager during that period of time. I'd be happy to sit down with you and give you that information on another time.
I might add to that, since I was there, and part of the process. Ken is right, Mr. Bloom is right. There were 2 major interview, actually 3, but 2 major interview processes that occurred. After the 103 applications were narrowed down to 3 and then 2, we individually visited, each council member individually visited with each candidate. And we did that obviously one-on-one, because we couldn't violate sunshine laws by doing that. And so we got to ask our own questions individually, which were very helpful. Then after that, there was a meeting in which these 2 chairs were filled one at a time with the 2 final applicants that were interviewed by the council. And Mr. Our current manager was 7-0. The three people on this table that were there voted in favor of having Mr. Pastu selected, and he was. It was a process that we relied on Mr. Slavin as our search. When we hired for $30,000, as I remember, to do our search, or more, I don't know what it was, 28. I stand corrected. It was, I missed by 2,000. I apologize for that. A number of thousands of dollars. We paid him to do that search. He did a national search for this person. And we each had, I had 103 resumes on my computer. And I went through every one of them. And I made selections. Everybody that was there at this council table made their own selections, and then we rated them top 10 or 12, as I remember, and then down to 3 and then 2. So that's the process. If I'm wrong, and Mr. Roulette or Ms. Rich, you can tell me I was not.
Real quick, let me ask you, you said you asked your own questions. Mr. Bloom said that you had scripted questions.
Nah, there's two different processes.
Okay, we're talking
about here.
different-
I'm speaking about the interim.
Okay.
We hired an interim city manager, and Mr. Olson is speaking about hiring the current city.
Okay, fine, thank you. Okay, just want to make
Right.
sure that.
Let me jump in on a couple of things that you should decide as relative to how you're going to do the interim interview. One of the things that is a question that I would think you would want to ask, and so as a body should consider before, is do you want the interim to be excluded from the search for the permanent? And the reason that you might want to do that is because you might, I'm saying might because I don't know, have put a chill on other candidates applying, because if the interim is also in the mix, the assumption is they have an automatic leg up because they get a long and extended interview by actually doing the job. And that will either breed contempt or it'll breed affection, but it usually works one of those two ways.
And that is exactly
I
what.
appreciate that, those thoughts, and it's one of those things that you know, it's gonna be, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't type thing, and I realize that.
So that's something for you to discuss.
Right,
And,
thank you.
and the second thing you said is, should we have a script of questions? In terms of that, that's a personal thing, but what you should do if you don't, and you can certainly discuss it with Mr. Bloom if you have any doubts about it, there are questions you absolutely cannot ask, period. And if you have any doubt about those, you better talk to Mr. Bloom.
As
Hopefully you
indicated
don't need
to-
to, yeah, and that, which is good, because I think that's, I know there's some, I don't know what you call those things, but I know there's employment, when you ask things in interviews that you can't ask and whatever, I know that, so, but, we always, sometimes things do slip out, and I hope that we know what not to make slip out, and, during any kind of questioning.
As long as you stick to the bona fide occupational requirements.
There you go.
You said.
So, okay, so that was my, again, my, my thought process, my recommendations, and, so we can, keep this thing hopefully moving forward, and get somebody or something, and I really do appreciate, Mr. Shepherd's advice on the one item, though, about the keeping, whether or not somebody's gonna be in the mix or not. I realize what that does also, and it works sometimes, like I said, both ways. It does work both ways, and, if somebody is internal, just an internal somebody applying for a position, knowing that, and I'll just use my own example, my own personal experiences of when I applied for different business administrator jobs, and I knew there was an internal candidate most of the time, and I'm gonna say 99% of the time, the internal candidate always got the job. So it was a waste of my time and effort to go out on interviews when there was an internal candidate applying for the position.
One of my suggestions is that since you had the honor, Your Honor, of making an initial contact, and all the remaining 6 have not, perhaps between now and the next time we set to meet to do whatever interviews, it seems to me we individually ought to be able to call the Florida League of Cities and ask to see if there are others that we might be interested in as other council members, and have them submit resumes as well. Because we didn't do this as a council, and I understand why, but as a council, I'm really concerned about
Okay.
voting as a vote.
No, I'm sorry. No, I know what you're saying there, but
Did I
what
keep my
I'm,
time? I'm sorry.
no, you didn't exceed your time. Go ahead and,
No, you got the.
but anyway, no, I did do that kind of, hopefully some due diligence on that part by asking Mr. Slavin for, the list that they had, and to go down, I went down the list, there's only, I think only around, I'm gonna say maybe 10, 12 names on their MIT list. It's managers and managers and transition list that they have. And it's a pretty decent list, but he gave, the list there, based on the people that he knew, he recommended 3 of those people to us at that point. And now, again, Mr. Slavin says, I am not part of your interim search. It's not part of his contract for it, so he won't be part of the interim search, anything other than what he gave me that day, and that information that day. So, based on that, like I said, we have somebody here now, and to, again, yeah, we can do it, we can go out and we can wait another 2 weeks, but we have names, we can start a process now, and if it's fine, if you don't like how you talk, or with the people that are here now, and one of them was a candidate that was vetted by 3 of you already.
I remember.
Okay, so, and I'm not sure if Mr. Cottrell was part of the process at the time, I don't know. And, but again, another highly recommended person from the other one. The other 2, got no, previous comments from anybody of Mr. Slavin's, stature, who's gonna be, coming with us for the future thing. So, and, I don't know if I talked with Mr. Slavin about the thing about what Mr. Shepherd had brought about, I can't recall that, but, we'll address that when the time comes, and, but, so, there's where I'm at right now at this point.
If I may, Mayor, I just did a quick look up on the FCCMA website. You're right, your numbers are virtually identical. There are 8 senior advisors and 8 managers in transition right now.
Yeah.
So there's a pretty short list.
Yeah, it's a short list, and,
I think it would be good to go with, vetted candidates from, Slavin Group.
these aren't from the Slavin group.
Well, I mean,
Okay.
okay, the names you had cited earlier is part of it.
That a recommendation is valid. I think it would also be appropriate to get, since this is rather important, an important responsibility, policy responsibility of ours, why don't we either ask Mark, Mr. Regentine, or our clerk, or somebody to get us a list of all that are available? What's wrong with that? What will we lose by having 18 or 12 that are available to come and talk to us?
There's not, but you're looking into a scheduling time frame, going through all the scheduling, and right now, if we narrow down the list, because no matter what list you come down up with, you're going to narrow it down to a few to interview. You're not going to, it's like your 103 candidates, you didn't interview 103 people, okay? That's the crack field to do that. So, yeah, we can come up with a list from here to, whatever, but it's still going to come down to a few that you're going to select to do it. Right now, we can go with that. If they're not acceptable, then we move it to the next step. And that's, we could do that. That's not an issue.
I still may make some calls just out of curiosity to see what's available, because there might have been some on there that I recognize from the prior interview.
Okay, and I appreciate that again, but that question was asked of Mr. Slavin. And I appreciate his responses to me, because he really didn't have to say too much if he didn't want to. And he's not billing me for that time either.
I don't know, we can in direction, so please cut me off if this isn't appropriate. But do we need to handle this, in this messaging, the include or exclude of the interim for the position now? Because it seems to me
I would.
messaging that we should.
I would, because if you already know one candidate for, that's what brought to my mind, you got one candidate, I want to be permanent. Well, then if you're going to preclude the interim from applying for the permanent, then that person's off the list. Whoever, I don't remember the name, but whoever that one is. And there may be others that feel the same way. I don't know. That's why I said you want to decide before you start asking questions, because then you might say, well, now we can't put that one because we said we were going to preclude them. Well, you know, so now would be the time to decide one way or the other.
I think that's great advice, because I think to be respectful of every candidate and their personal situation or professional situation and whatnot, that we should decide if it is a factor or not. So I'll just start out and just say that personally, it doesn't bother me if it's included or excluded. I would not, so to try to say it more clearly, whoever the interim city manager becomes, I personally don't have a problem either including or excluding. I really don't have a strong opinion. I would, if it were my fiefdom, I would leave it open.
Well, I have no problem with including.
I have no problem with having it be inclusive. So, you know, whoever's
Just leave it open-ended.
the interim is perfectly welcome to apply to be the permanent. I have no problem with that.
I think, because if we do that, we'll just use Mr. Regantine as an example. If he became the interim, then we'd be saying that he's excluded from applying for a permanent at that point. And
But that's if we
did that. So no, and I feel we could be and can be inclusive and let people make their decisions on how they want to do. Depends again on the questions. I would recommend that you know, this is where we're going to use the services of our HR and to help us get the times. And do we have to do any kind of noticing for these interviews?
The interviews are not public meetings,
Right.
at least of the way you've described them.
Right.
If you start doing them as a group, then yes.
No, they will not be as a group. And everybody can schedule their time, and so that's why I picked it. They're here at our pleasure, and they said they're available. And the only thing we'll have to, I can do this, and if you like, I can help coordinate with Mr. Bloom, the names, and yeah, you have them all, but we can whatever I can do to help with that. If you need my help with anything, to coordinate their times and what we need to for arrangements, that's fine. If your office can and everything from this point forward, coordinate with the city council the times for those 2 days, and then we'll move from there.
Mr. Mayor, if Mr. Cutney, if I'm saying that right, is true to his cover letter and is not interested in interviewing for an interim position, even if it could perhaps lead to the ongoing position, that would take our list down to Cottrell, Barrett, and that's only 3. Am I correct on that?
Well, I think what we had said earlier, that allow Mr. Cutney to interview, and during the interview, determine at that point if he wants to, you know, if he wants to accept the position, or if his interviewing is strictly for the purpose of
I think let's just ask him straight up. We're interviewing right now for interim. If you're interested, we'd love to include you. If you're not gonna come because it's an interim, why waste his time and why waste?
I think we should clarify to him, though, that applying for the interim does not exclude him from the permanent position.
Okay.
So that he can make a more informed decision.
Anyway, my point is, that's 3 or 4. I guess I'd like to have, you know, like 5 to talk to. So in some manner, either Mr. Bloom or you, Mr. Mayor, or somebody, I'd like to see a couple more candidates in there.
Mr. Bloom, you're going to be in the office tomorrow? Okay, fine. And I think what we can do, and and, Mr. Eglantine, and I think at this point, you're here as, you know, as your deputy manager position, and maybe have Mr. Lump tomorrow to, make the phone call to Mr. Cutney, have it clarified. You know the right words to say? Okay, and then, you know, find out if he is interested one way or the other, how his interest is, and if not, if you would go to the list of the ones from the MIT list and come up with, two more names at that point, to extend that list if you can.
I'd like to agree with you, that, we should have more than 3 or 4. This is too important, to me at least, to just have a small handful and, or a small amount like that. And I think anybody who is qualified that should become available through Mr. Regentin's search or whatever, Mr. Bloom's search, or Mr. Slavin's search, or my search, or anybody else's, we should be able to find out if they're available in that time frame to come quickly interview for interim manager. And if there are anything more than 6 or 7 might be a heavy load, but 5 seems to be good. I wouldn't mind going further, but 5, I certainly agree with 5 at the minimum.
Let me ask Mr. Blum a question again, is, if we had 5 candidates, even with 4, even 5, is that manageable in a 2-day period with, 7 council people?
It would be a matter of having a couple of locations in this building for candidates. You wouldn't just have everybody go to the same location, and then it would be revolving council people in and out.
Right,
in and
right.
out. So we can talk about that. It's gonna be tight, in that time frame. Now, I don't believe I've heard you suggest dates yet.
We also did, Monday and Tuesday.
Monday and Tuesday of next week?
They're both, 2 of them, of the 4 of them that I had, the names I had, the 4 of them were all available on Monday and Tuesday.
Mr. Mayor, perhaps any new names that are added into the mix would be available later in the week, so.
Because I know personally, I'm available all next week and, all 5 days, and, I figure if we had some different dates, then council members can make their adjustments, and because since we can do phone interviews if there's jobs, things like that, then we can, they can schedule time during lunch or something like that to do, their interview at that point. So, if the next 2 names you come up with, if, Mr. Cutney is taking himself out of it and you come up with 2 more names, then just try to schedule them anywhere, in that week if you can, get everything scheduled 1 week.
Plug them in 45-minute blocks minimally.
Yes.
I had a question for Mr. Bloom. Is it appropriate that we post this on the city website so that if there are any employees that would want to apply, that would be their avenue to do so?
Internally, no, it would be posted internally through notification of employees. Not on the city website. We would post it internally, but I think.
And would that be something that you could do, or? I'm not sure it's moot. I just want to make sure. We've talked about people that are here now being able to apply.
If the council wishes that it be posted to existing employees, I'll be happy to do that.
That's no problem.
But and that's my understanding of how it should be. You can't. I don't know. We can do whatever we want, but to me, it's just you have to.
Mr. Shepherd,
Yes, sir.
do we need a motion on all this, or do we just have a direction thing here?
Ordinarily, I would have said no, but in this case, I would say yes. Because of all the issues regarding minutes and who's saying what and clarity, we should probably make sure we have this very clear.
Okay.
you've been listening very.
You want me to tell you what I think the motion is?
Suggestions are highly welcome at this
Here's
point.
I don't care who makes it, but I think it would say essentially this, that you would move that interviews be scheduled, initial interviews anyway, with the 4 candidates that have been identified here tonight, on Monday and Tuesday of next week, that they should be informed prior to that time that their being in play for the interim position would not exclude them if they chose to from applying for the full-time position. And that in addition, members are free to try to find other candidates who are qualified to apply and perhaps be interviewed later in the week. And if I count the last part, that the city would post this availability of this position on the website, so anybody else who might not be aware of, who might be out there, could apply. On the city's website.
Can we cut this into 2 or 4 motions?
Do it
just to
however you
make
want,
it
but those are the points that I heard. Did I miss it?
Well, I thought it was 5. I heard 2 council members request 5.
No, I'm talking about the ones we know.
No.
Wasn't, then they're wrong, but he included
Okay.
additionals, possibility of additionals being scheduled in that motion,
Right.
so.
Okay.
I realize there are different points in there, but it's all pertaining to one thing, and I don't know if we need to break that out.
That's up to you. I can do it however you want. I just wanted to, those are the points that I heard.
So,
Mr. Mayor, can I get clarification on something?
please.
Are you asking that this be posted for purposes of employees applying? And that's not on the city website. That is notification that goes out through an all email for all city employees.
I think that was the intent, not website, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I misspoke.
Okay. And the normal internal posting that you referred to.
Okay.
All right, I'll take a stab if, so I move that, we schedule, next week for, interviews with the 4 candidates presented, and that we include in that, administration of setting that up for next week, wording that they know that by applying for the interim role, they are not excluded from also applying for the permanent position in the future, and that the internal notification process of the city be used to post a position for existing employees to also apply, and that Mr. Bloom, in connection, or that staff be directed to look for further candidates in the common sites for finding candidates, so that they might be included also next week as candidates for the position.
Did that sum that up, Mr. Shepherd?
I think so.
Real?
I mean, because it goes without saying that any of you who have candidates in mind that might be qualified can say, hey, contact the city and put your name in the hat. So that's a no-brainer. And people in the audience can do that.
I'll second the motion. Yep, you got something.
Just, Mr. Mayor, if I could, the only question I have, and certainly Ken and I could work this out, but I'd like to have a discussion here, is that if there are internal candidates, what would be the vetting process for them to determine whether they are qualified candidates? Do we just give them to you and say, here they are, and, we're gonna be scheduling interviews, and how do we do that administratively if there are internal candidates?
And, I realize, I think what we're looking for is a person who's qualified to be an interim city manager, has the qualifications and certifications necessary to do, and to do the job. And,
So if you wanna rely on us to do that, I think we have a pretty good idea of what it takes to be a city manager in this city.
Right.
So would that be under Mr. Bloom's purview then?
Mr. Pastu is still a city manager.
Correct.
so-
Mr. Pastu?
well,
Yes.
because he's sitting here as a deputy city
Yes.
manager tonight, so he's going to relay, back.
And we might as well.
It's gonna
tap
come
in-
from the city manager.
We might as well tap into Vince's experience for the next month. I mean, that's why he's
Yeah,
here.
that's why he's here. So no, that's why I was concerned about some of the conversation earlier on in the evening, that maybe, something's ruined that I wasn't aware of, so. But anyway, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion from the council at this point? Mr. Shepherd, this is an item for, public input.
It is an item, actually, I'm gonna say yes, it's close call, because it is about how you replace your key position. I'm not sure, and you got, because I wasn't included, did you even have a public period for the hiring of Vince when you made the decision, other than your, but that was when you got down to the final candidates,
Not
right?
final two
Not
candidates.
not how we got
No.
there. But given that we have this divide, sort of, I wanna make sure that nobody's upset, so I would say the safer thing to do is to say yes.
Okay, open it up to the public. Any comments from the public?
Monique Richardson, 745 Hilltop Court. It just seems that taking the hard-edged stance, Ms. Rich and Mr. Lawson made a good suggestion with Mark Reddington. You took a hard-edged stance that you're showing once again you're unwilling to work with qualified professionals that are within the city. It's a total waste of tax dollars and time to accept these applications. You don't even have the sense to see the quality when it's right in front of you. You're going to see quality in applicants. I warn them, if they're listening to this, please run away, because the first time you go against the city council, you will be discharged, dismissed, fired, choose your word. And by the way, they did not fill the deputy city manager position. Mr. Reddington was already handling those duties and those responsibilities when it was put upon him and he was asked to do those. He did not ask for a pay raise. It was recognized by the previous city council, the good job that he was doing, and he was rewarded for it. That's how kind of business works. So what you're saying is that you wanted the previous council to add another city employee with a full salary and benefits to fill that position of the deputy city manager. Once again, another waste of tax dollars. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Jim Yatsik, 206 East 9th Avenue. Just to look around locally might be good for all council to maybe talk to the city of Eustis. They went through a process when you're going to be hiring interim. If they'd hired an interim, they would have had a year and a half of interim pay, as opposed to what they did was somebody internal, because they went and interviewed, rejected all their interviewees for their city manager, came back again, it took them a year and a half. That person, who actually was only hired in 2008, was in community development, I believe it was, Mrs. Kramer, took the extra money, but there was not an extra position above her added to her. So they did it for a year and a half. Talk to them, see how it worked out. That's all I'm asking.
Rosanna Bato, 541 East First Avenue. I'm just trying to figure out why we're going through a convoluted process when we really don't have to. And I say this based on years of experience in the senior executive service in the federal government. And I was a deputy of the Medicaid Bureau. The director was political appointed. So I'm very...
Just back off that,
Okay,
just a little bit. That was some
Okay, thank
suggestions
you.
from Josh.
Yeah, thank you. So I went through more than my fair share of political transitions. They were not fun. Neither is this, as everybody knows, regardless what side of the issue you're on. The bottom line is, as I said, I was the deputy of the Medicaid Bureau at the federal level. And so when we had a political transition, I became the acting director until a new political appointee came in. I did it over and over and over. That's why you have a deputy. So if you need somebody in an acting position, the transition is easy. And then you go out and you find a permanent director. In this case, a permanent city manager. I truly believe that our staff in this city deserves some stability. This has been a little wild ride for the last couple of months, as you know. And you have a deputy city manager. I have no idea why you wouldn't just make Mark Reddington the acting city manager, and instead of going through this interim process, and if this person is not ultimately selected, then you have another transition. How many more transitions does this city need, especially city staff? This is not fair to them. They trust Mark, they know Mark. You all don't have to run around trying next week to interview as many people as you can cram in a couple of days to get an interim person here who may or may not last. I mean, it just doesn't seem, from years of experience at senior level management in political transitions, this just doesn't make sense. That's why you have deputies. You bubble them up to act, proven, I did it myself plenty of times. So, and it was easy transitions. The staff didn't feel like they were going through a transition. They knew me. I was the deputy. And we broke in the new person, taught them how to do their job. Mark can certainly do that. I'm sure he can do it with both hands tied behind his back. But that's my position is, why are we going through this convoluted process for nothing? You've got a perfectly qualified person to just step up, and then you guys go out and find a city manager instead of going through this mess 2 times. Who wants to go through a whole bunch more interviews? You want to look at another 100 applications? It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Anyone else in the public wish to address the council on this issue? Seeing none, we'll go back to council. Any other comments from the council? Seeing none, can we have a vote, please, Ms. Shaw?
I'm just trying to make sure there was I know there's a motion, I wasn't sure there was a second. There was, okay.
Lady moved that we schedule next week interviews with 4 candidates presented, and that we include in that administration of setting that up for next week's wording, that they know that by applying for interim role, they are not excluded from applying for permanent position in the future, and that the internal notification process of the city be used to post position for existing employees to also apply, and that staff be directed to look for further candidates in the common sites for finding candidates so that they may be included also next week as candidates for the position. Roulette seconded. That is Mr. Slavy's wording, not Mr. Shepherd's. I have both. Mr. Slavy?
Yes.
Mr. Roulette?
Yes.
Ms. Tillett?
Yes.
Mr. Robson?
No.
Ms. Rich?
No.
Mr. Creel?
Yes.
Mayor Jerome?
Yes. Okay. Next on our agenda was, discussion of the, I know it was on here, we put it on there for a permanent city manager, and, if you would care to discuss that process now, or, we can discuss that at another time.
I suggest later.
I suggest later.
Thank you very much for that. I have a motion for adjournment, please.
Just a moment.
One second.
No.
Okay, I had a conversation with Mr. Pastu, just prior to this meeting. He asked me to convey to you, the fact that, based upon obviously the publicity that's happened with his leaving the city, a municipality in Michigan has reached out to him, to interview for a vacant position as city manager. He asked me if you would consider amendment to his separation agreement that would essentially, if he would get a job during that 20-week period, that he would not take the money from the city if he was appointed to another position.
Okay,
Seems highly honorable.
it is, and,
I don't know, is it in order? I mean, just because it's a special meeting, can we talk about it?
The answer to your question, and this is a good time to go into this because you have both what the law requires and what your policies and procedures have been. You're not even required to have an agenda, although a lot of people think so.
Okay.
That's not a sunshine issue, and you can vote on things that are not on the agenda. That's also not required. It's not a good idea because it makes people angry, but you can do it. So to your point, the answer is yes, you can discuss it and you can act on it if you choose to.
my question is, I think more to the point, we had a special meeting tonight with special items on that agenda, okay? And now since it's a posted with the items that had to be listed for this meeting, are we allowed to entertain any other thing on there since this is designated for only 2 items and 2 items only?
The answer is, again, yes, you can, because you noticed the meeting, and the law does not require you to even have an agenda of any kind. So you're legally permitted to do whatever you wish on this item. The reason I'm being cautious with that is because I'm also telling you that this is what some people would get irritated about. However, and this is important, it also is context. If you look at what's being proposed, it's a city savings. What's not to like about it?
Okay, and I agree with that, but I would like to go through a procedure here with this. This is coming through, again, maybe use a lawyer's term, hearsay. So I would like.
Rest assured, I had the discussion with
Well,
them.
I know that, but what I would like to what I like to see before the council takes any action or anything on that, I would like to see, something drafted, through Mr. Shepherd, presented to the council in a formal format, and I appreciate what you guys say, and I would really have loved to have that conversation also, but, as mayor, that would have been a nice conversation to have, but but I would like to bring that to we have a meeting coming up shortly, and I think if I can read the council and different people's thoughts, when we're talking about some potential savings to the city, yes, we can go ahead and entertain that.
And I think that's the direction he's looking for. He did make an attempt to get a hold of you before the meeting. He used me as a last resort, knowing I'd be sitting in the seat.
Very good, thank you.
Mr. Regan, I'd make the motion in a split second. Does Mr. Pastu object to waiting next week to get that?
No, I think in abundance of caution, it should be redrafted. He wanted to get a read from the city council whether you're willing to
We can
accept
look
an
at it
amendment of that
on
variety.
addendum.
He's got a yes.
Pardon me?
It's just an amendment.
Just a
And
minute.
literally, it would be like a one-line amendment. It's not
Right.
dumb.
And, no, and I think that would be more appropriate for the council to act with something in writing, and again, no discredit to, your conversation, but I trust what you're saying, but I think we should have it in writing before we act on it, and, that's my personal.
I think that's very honorable. You'll certainly get a yes from me.
Would it be appropriate for us to take action to direct, city attorney to
No.
draft that now?
No, because he can't do
It's unnecessary because if he were to propose, he's giving you a heads up.
Right.
He could have easily said, hey, I'd like you to draft, or I'd like Jeff Mantel to draft this amendment to present at the next meeting. Again, it seems like it would be a no-brainer,
Right.
because it has the potential for saving the city a bunch of money.
Right, so no, but it's better to act with something, and naturally, the course of action would be going through the city attorney to bring something like that to us, so.
So in other words, that you would, ordinary course, you wouldn't be involved in it until we're in front of you.
Right. So, again, we'll go back and entertain a motion for adjournment.
I move we adjourn.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Thank you.